Hello, my name's Jade, and today we will be discussing the third book in the Throne of Glass series, HEIR by Sarah J. Maas. Because I'm so slow to this series, I've heard a lot of kind of things about it, and I think this one is the one where people started to really get invested in the series and started to really love it, and like this was a step up, and so I went in thinking that this was going to be a step up. But I kind of ended up having a lot of the feelings I had in Crown of Midnight. It felt kind of fillery to me. It was kind of just like a training montage, gathering information, book, that kind of stuff. And it's a big book. I wasn't always thrilled to be reading it. It wasn't always really exciting, and there were times where it was a little bit slower for me. But I still love this series. I love this world. It's so cool and it's so epic. We're going places. It's gonna happen. I know it will. I have high hopes that the next one I won't have the feelings on, because I think we're gonna start doing things now. I would give it, it's hard because it is more sophisticated than the other two in terms of its storytelling and the way that the stories kind of interweave together, and the way that Sarah's just been setting things up from book one, from book two, and then she's tying in the Assassin's Blade. The way she just weaves all these little pieces together is so clever and so entertaining to watch play out. So I feel like I should give it like an 8.5 or something, but I think it's an 8. I think it's just like the other ones. I still really enjoyed it. I still had a lot of fun. I still love this series, and I'm really excited for Queen of Shadows. I don't get what's up with her uniform on the cover of this one. She never wears anything like that. She never wears a dress like that on the back, and I don't think she even ever really holds a bow and arrow. I like the colours on this one though a lot. I think they're really pretty. If you've yet to read HEIR, I suggest you leave now, or I will spoil the book and you want to read this. Good, I recommend it. Goodbye if you have yet to read HEIR. I've kind of split my thoughts into 3 storylines. I think that was the easiest way to talk about this stuff. Kind of want to start with the Selena storyline. Okay, so we open with Selena on the rooftops drinking wine and eating the takoyaki bread or whatever it was, just like all time low. She was sent over to assassinate King and the Crown Prince, and we just completely go off the rails from that. Interesting that what kind of slumped her into this depression is seeing the Crown Prince and all the people cheer for him, this wholesome nation. I think it was, and maybe it's got something to do with the fact that she recognized herself in him, because they have the same eyes, right? They're both Ash Rivers. The Ash River and the family lines, I'm getting all kinds of confused. Her and Galen are like kind of cousins. Are they described as cousins? They describe them as kind of cousins. I think as the book went on, I kind of came to terms with it a little bit, but in the beginning I was just like, I need a family tree. And I understand that the family tree could very well have spoilers on it, so it's fine. I'm getting confused with the Ash Rivers and Moore's line and Mab's line, and we have the Haviljord line and Elena, and Selena's related to Elena because she's a Galathinius, but not directly because she went into the Haviljord line, so is Dor. It gets confusing. I also wanted a map of Wendlin, and I know it's not that important, and I wonder if we're done with Wendlin now. Is Wendlin a continent or is it a country? I just was struggling visualizing it a little bit, and I did find one online, and I don't know if it's legit, but it helps me just kind of visualize it a little bit better. But I did originally want a map of Wendlin. We go off with Rowan. I kept imagining him like shoulder length, straight black hair with like this section pinned up kind of like Legolas style, like the front of it kind of half up, half down. I imagine with the same hairdo, just white, so maybe even more. Wow, actually the more I think of it, the more like Legolas that would look. I hear about Fae have different forms in Crown of Midnight, but I wasn't really sure what was going on, and it turns out they have animal forms. Rowan is a white hawk. There's a lot of birds. Mab, I think, was the swan. Mora, was she a hawk as well? Maeve's form cannot be contained to a single thing. The story when Amrys tells us the story about how she's just talons, and that's worrying. I wonder what her power is, because we don't really know, do we? Who's the owl? We saw the owl in the beginning, and then we saw the owl again in the end, and I don't think it's the queen. It kind of made it sound like it was the queen at the end, so I'm not sure. Maybe she has multiple forms. And Selena's animal form is human, which is pretty handy. Obviously, that's how she's gotten by all these years without anyone knowing she's a fae. Some half-fae, demi-fae, they can't even have other forms. I liked the story of the one that was the pig. I bet that impacts their like warriordom and like how high up in the ranks they are, how good their animal form is. Rowan is from Mora's line. It's confusing, these queens, and then we have Mala, the sun goddess as well, and then Mora used to be the queen of the moon, but now it's Mab, who is also Diane, and who is also the queen of the hunt and the moon. It's a lot at times, and it's kind of so like interwoven like that it's kind of hard to actually figure out what's going on. And he's Prince Rowan. What is he prince of exactly? Is he prince of the Mora line? Is there an equivalent for the Mab line, if so? Or would that just be like Galen and his daddy-o? But then Rowan mentioned some family at the end, but is that Galen and his daddy? Family tree. And it's scary hearing like the stories of the other two sisters. No one's really sure how they died or why they died, and Maeve might have killed them so that she was the only one. It's scary because she seems pretty powerful. The way she called them half-breeds and she looked down on Selena, the way she described how her parents had broken her laws and promises, and now we know that's because she was scared of the Galathinius slime. Poses a real threat to her, and I can only imagine Maeve is ticked off and something confusing and bad is gonna end up happening down that line. Hopefully Selena kills her. I wonder if Selena will become the fairy queen as well as Terrasen queen. If the demi-fae aren't as powerful as fae, fair enough, but you think they'd have their own section, their own division, and then those who are powerful can be in league. Like that, it makes sense doing it by rank, but like to just completely look down on them in that way is so horrible. And like the way Maeve, I can only assume, thinks about humans. I thought that the humans and fae were like fine over there, but they're not, because the fae were so horrible to the humans for so long that the humans don't trust the fae anymore. When Maeve was like clawing at Selena's mind as well, it just really unnerves me, and I don't think we're done with her. We obviously learn a lot more about the fae. They're very animalistic. They could like smell that Selena wanted to be left alone. They have mates and they get very territorial. When they have injured ones within their ranks, they have this overwhelming urge to look after them. And then obviously we have the demi-fae, and some don't even shift, some don't have powers. Luca mentioned a female fae who could control all four elements, and then went to Dornell and he was like, oh, she was so pretty, it's such a shame. Is she gonna come into play? Because that sounds like something's up with her. We also had a lot more monsters going on in this one. When she went into that clearing, thing was there that we now know was a Vogue prince. It was so scary. And then Rowan was like, yeah, it shouldn't have been here. I don't know what that was so unnerving, because Rowan's this like ancient old. I loved it at one point when she was like, oh, did you know Mab and More? And he was like, I'm old, but I'm not that old. And the skinwalkers are very creepy as well. Made up of bits of flesh. Ronan, like, he bit her. That just triggered some like animal instinct for her to shift. And then she shifts again with the skinwalkers and she lights them up. Turns out that like a few people have the power of fire. I'm guessing it's a Galathinius only trait. I'm guessing it's because Mala has to be the one that gives it to you. She gave it to Brannon, and that's the only reason it's on Earth anyway. That's my assumption. And at one point as well, she shifts and Rowan starts like poking her. I did watch a couple reviews before filming this. A lot of them were ones that like were made of the time of this book coming out. So they would all say like, oh, I love like the bromance, like the friendship between Selena and Rowan. I was like, I was reading into this differently. Okay, they're not there yet, but I definitely see romantic potential then. If I had to put money on who is endgame, I'd put it on Rowan. But that's also because of the way I've heard people talk about Rowan. But because I had that knowledge going in, I could like read into these little things differently, like him poking. You could just see that as him being playful, but it also was kind of like he was flirting with her. I loved the flashback when we saw little Selena and little Adian. Her mother, she kind of did make things quite difficult, didn't she? Because Selena, she needs to control her power. She needs to. It's too dangerous, if nothing else. She doesn't want her to go to the magic school. Fair, like, why not get someone in? You're royalty. Why not get someone in to teach her? And why was she so dead against Maeve? Aiden mentioned at one point how the Galathiniuses never trusted Maeve. Obviously now we know why. But her mother wasn't a she was an Ash River. So that's not why. What did she know? Selena walks in on Rowan tattooing, and they have a little argument. And she was so alone and she felt so guilt-ridden. He's like, I don't owe you anything. And it's described like that her light sputters out. Her light thing throughout Crown of Midnight was hardcore, continued throughout all of this one, and it was so well done, the way that like part 1 was Heir of Ash and part 2 was Heir of Fire. And then obviously Emrys has a go at Rowan and is like, what did you say to her? And he says that Selena could make a better world. Like, he recognized her as an Ash River. Do we think he means, I mean, he probably means King of Ardlan as well, and like clearing up that whole situation. But I thought he also probably meant overthrowing Maeve, sorting out their situation. There's the whole monster from the lake scene right after that, and she has to save Luca. I really liked Luca. I really hope we see him again. And the fish was like out of this world. It like slipped in from one of the, like the portal things or something crazy. The ruby in the sword might have been the fish's eye, possibly. Rowan and Cillian have their little scrap. She tells him about Nehemia. I love it when he says, like, you shouldn't apologize for defending those you care about. And like, he's all burnt up, but he doesn't care. Rowan, in terms of the ships, where I stand, it probably would go Kale, Dorian, Rowan, only because he's new on the block, but he, I think, offers the healthiest relationship for Selena. He's such a rock. And his morals, I think it's because he's so old. His morals, he knows what he thinks is right and wrong, and he's dedicated. He's like otherworldly, isn't he? Because he's so old. Like I said, I put money on them being endgame. They've technically hurt each other though, so can they be mates? Is it possible? Or they're not in love yet, so it doesn't count, or they didn't hurt each other significantly enough. I wonder if either of them are even thinking about that possibility right now, because they clearly both really care about each other in a way that I think would very easily spark into something else. And obviously later on we have the mention about how Kale can't be Selena's mate because she hurt him, she tried to kill him, and so I already didn't think Kale was endgame. It could be Dorian. I still personally really love Kale though, and I'll get more into it in a minute. Selena can also heal things from her Ash River line and control water. They have the conversation about Rowan's mate and how guilty he feels, and he never really thought he came back from. That's what his tattoo is. It's his story of how his mate died. They say that they're gonna try and find their way back together, and somewhere far and deep inside her, an ember began to glow. And then of course we have part 2, Heir of Fire. So well done. The more I think about Heir of Fire, it just completely makes sense, because obviously she wields fire, and she used to be Ash, and she was all burnt out in December, and then she like complete lights up at the end of the book. Crown of Midnight, I can't for the life of me figure out what that meant. I mean, there's a lot of like midnight hijinks and stuff, but crown? Is it her? Is she the Crown of Midnight because of the Queen? Is it the crown as in the one that had the secret compartment? I can't figure out what that is. Kind of obscure. It was really clever how Rowan was the one that trained her. It wasn't another fire user. He could like literally suffocate her flames, and he was like the safest one to train with her. And they talk about how magic, it has a bottom, it can run out, and you can burn it. You can quite literally burn yourself up and just like either go crazy or just like evaporate. I wonder if this must be true with all magic users. So like Dorian and the witches, I bet it's true for them as well. She kind of like burns herself out, only not really. She like gave herself into the magic. It was like dancing in the breeze or whatever, and it happened so subtly. Like I was literally stood there like, did I miss something? How did we get here? It was very scary. So now we need to know that she needs to have a tight handle on it at all times. And thank God for Rowan and his eyes to like cool her down. I love how he looked after her. She had to stay with him and just like smothering her. I loved it on her birthday when he gave her the chocolates and then she like kissed him. It was so cute. So we have Karanam. I'm so glad for the audiobooks. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't know how to pronounce half of these names. And you can give someone else your power. And I mean, I don't know if you thought that it was gonna be her and Rowan. I thought it was either gonna be her and Rowan, or like maybe her and Adian, or like another fae that she was gonna befriend at some point. But Selena was gonna have one for surezies. And at one point, Selena described their magic as like playing with each other, and like that it was kind of foreshadowing that they were Karanam. It was so Power Bati-esque, and I don't know if that's why a lot of people kind of think they're friends. I don't think we ever said that Karanam can't be lovers. I loved how she had like fire weapons and she was like making shields out of fire when she was fighting with the Volks at the end, and like fire attached to her sword. That was so cool. I can only imagine her in battle. Such a badass. Aiden said at one point, when we're fighting wars, she will be far away from the battle. Okay, you tell her that, because that's not going to go down well. They keep finding these dead bodies of the demi-fae, and then they find that one, and there's like the obsidian-y like blood. It was so clever the way that the Vogue, essentially, it tied in with what Heyo and co was figuring out, because by the point Selena started figuring them out, we already knew a lot of the backstory from Heyo. Selena kind of thinks at first they're trying to create a perfect version of that thing in the dungeon, and I wonder if that thing of the dungeons was an attempt of a Valk prince. We still don't really know what it was or why it was there. And they also were wondering if they were trying to make demi-fae hosts. I don't think so. I think it was more so the experimenting thing, but I don't think we ruled that as a possibility completely out. Obviously Maeve says that if the king gets all 3 word keys, he wouldn't even need like alive bodies. He could use dead bodies to put these Vogs in. I'm only assuming the king has at least been looking for the 3rd word key. I'm assuming, because everyone keeps assuming he has at least 2, so I'm assuming he has 2. I mean, it would save us a lot of work. I wonder if Arabin even knows. Ugh. And then obviously we find the 200 soldiers and the creatures. There's like 4 total, including General Nark, who obviously at this point we've already heard from Kale. It's just so cool the way it was tied together. The way Rowan described it is really interesting. He's like, our magic, our essence is like repelled by them. And so I wonder if the Fae came along as like a defense mechanism against the Valg. Like I wonder about the origin of the Fae, where and how they came from. And it was so scary, like the whole torture thing, the way that they can just be like covered in iron and then they can be tortured any which way. Like Rowan described at one point, like he had a bone removed and like Selena cut him off, but it's so scary. I wonder if we're gonna see that at any point. I'm so scared this one's gonna do it to Selena. It was also really scary when they came face to face. Was it with 1 or 2? I can't remember now. Of the creatures, and it was like getting closer and closer to her. She couldn't really find it, and then in the beginning of the next chapter, it just like showed up behind her. It was very clever. Her plan, found the skinwalkers, and the way it was written was all very well done. Of course, we found out that they assumed the skinwalkers killed it, but it didn't. I'm assuming the Vol killed the skinwalkers, which is scary because the skinwalkers are supposed to be like pretty powerful. Like even Rowan tries to avoid. Only really Selena can like light them up. And then they stayed in the tree together, and the way it was described was so like, it was cute. You have the whole Dovier Calacala situation and that girl with the uprising. I can't remember if it was in the end of Crown. I feel like it was in the end of Crown at midnight when she heard about Nehemiah's death. She started an uprising. King killed them all. It was a big deal for Selena to free the slaves of Indovia because she knows what they've gone through, and I think she wanted to slave the ones in Calacala as well, especially for Nehemiah. She said about her scars, she doesn't want to kill them because it's to remind her that she needs to go and free them all, and she just kind of broke. And the orchestra, that was such a beautiful chapter, and it was so sad and so reminiscent of the singer from Crown of Midnight. Then we have this little fight situation with the Volg. The Volg say that players of the unfinished game have come back, and so I'm assuming that's like why Elena is around. I wonder what happened to Brannon. We still don't know what happened to him. Like, it was so cool when Ronan's friends ran through the path of fire. Gabriel stopped. I really loved Gabriel. I hope we separate him from Eve sooner rather than later. Get her again and they start torturing her. It was really upsetting to read about Nehemiah and Sam whipping her and just how guilty she feels about it all. I loved reading about her and Dorian as a child. It was really cute. But then of course it was immediately followed by the worm, headache, and the fire, and the king smiling at her. I'm surprised the king doesn't recognize Selena as Aelin, honestly. Her mother just like drowns her, essentially. Her parents were really sweet, and I loved little Aelin's relationship with them. The amulet of Orinth, which is the last lost both word key. Selena was like, oh, it didn't protect me, I lost it in the river, blah blah blah, immediately. But wasn't it though? Or didn't it wash up with you? And Arabin took it because it seemed like too big a thing to have just lost. Even not knowing the relevance of it being a word key. Her parents died, and the fact that there was the smell of the Volg in the room. How long have they been back for? Earlier, Selena mentions that it was another woman that was there, and she could hear like another woman's cries, and that was what really broke her. So we hear the story of Lady Marian, how brave she was to sacrifice herself. The sacrifice Nehemiah made is so layered because of that, and the whole coward thing. There's so much more depth to it than we knew new, and it's so well done, it's so clever. I wonder what happened of Elide. I don't think she was ever listed as being confirmed dead, and she's like heir of Parenth, so I wonder if she's gonna come back. I love how like the little folk helped her when she was stuck, and just all these mentions of the little folk. It's so sweet, and how they like saved all the animals before the fight. Oh, and then we have that section where all those people are telling her to get up, including herself. Like Alien Ashford was there. I was like tearing up a little bit. It was very powerful. Uncle was there. Her uncle was actually the king. I had it in my mind that her dad was the king. She would not let that light go out. She would fill the world with it, with her light, her gift. She would light up the darkness so brightly that all who were lost or wounded or broken would find their way to it, a beacon for those who had still dwelt in the abyss. It would not take a monster to destroy a monster, but light to drive out the darkness. She was not afraid. She was their queen, and she could offer them nothing less. Owning Galathinius smiled at her, hands still outstretched. "Get up," the princess said. Selena reached across the earth between them and brushed her fingers against Aelin's and arose. And they went parallel to Heyo. Her character development in this book was really strong, where it was like up and down and up and down. She described to Rowan at one point she didn't want to be queen because it felt like shackles, and I think at this point she realises that it's her destiny. I'm worried that she's the only one that can kill them. Like if we have to fight a giant army of Volg, and Selena's the only one that's not gonna end well, so we're gonna have to find some other way of killing them. And she has that mark on her forehead again. We now know is because Brannon was like the son of a nobody. He was a bastard or something, and so it's like a bastard nameless mark. And then we have the showdown with Maeve. We learned that the sword is Athril's. The way Selena described the stone city before, the fact that it's like surrounded by a river, so it's separated from the woods, and the whole thing's made of stone so that Selena couldn't catch it on fire, Brannon couldn't catch it on fire, although she still like heats up all of the stone and threatens to burn people. Just like completely defies Maeve, and it's such a big move. And that the story we've heard that Maeve sent the keys off to Brannon is wrong. Brannon ran away with them because Maeve wanted to use them, or she tried to steal them or something. I can't remember how Brannon even got them in the first place, and Athril fought her off and she killed Athril. That's how ruthless she is. I mean, maybe she regrets it, but she seemed pretty hot and bothered about the sword and the ring. Selena sees this future. Norak gives her this future, and at the time when she got it, I was like, well, it must be a bad future because Aval's giving it to her, and that's all they're good for. Who Norak once was, it was like a warning to her. This future is a pretty good future. She's queen, she has the ward keys, festivities going on, like it seems like a happy future, but it's not. It's a warning, and I wonder why. Like, why do we not want this? I mean, Selena knows, so I'm assuming she's gonna have to ruminate on it because she ultimately wants to fix the world. She frees Ronan, and he decides, oh, now that I'm free, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna give another blood oath, because apparently I cannot be an independent human capable of my own thoughts. Like, they clearly have some deep bond between the two of them. I love their like little silent conversations, the way they just would like stare each other down. And he tattoos her back, and she finally like prays for the dead, prays for her family and for Sam and Hemia. 3 lines of text scrawled over her 3 largest scars. The story of her love and loss now written on her. 1 line for her parents and uncle, 1 line for Lady Marian, and 1 line for her court and her people. On the smaller shorter scars were the stories of Nehemia and of Sam, her beloved dead. No longer would they be locked away in her heart. No longer would she be ashamed. She's just such a stronger person coming out of it, and so now she's kind of alone, isn't she? Rowan's not going with her. I feel more confident with that. Like, she's not gonna end up drinking wine on a rooftop somewhere. So she has a list of things she wants to get done. She's gonna go to Arabin, then Kaol, then Terrazan. I'm excited. I'm excited to see Arabin. I've been waiting. I hope we kill him. I hope this is it. How long has this been here? She was alien Ashravit Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. It's been a while since we heard that line. I don't think it came up in Crown of Midnight as often, so I'm glad it was in here some more.